Hey there, everyone. I'm Raymond Lee, the host of Clocking Out. This podcast, it was born from a deeply personal place. Like many of you listening, I've experienced those moments where you look at your career and you think to yourself, there has to be more than this. Those crossroads we all experience, they're hard. We tend to stay safe, feeling stuck, then taking that leap of faith. Clocking Out is dedicated to my mom, who showed me what courage really looks like when she took her own leap of faith to pursue career fulfillment. Her journey inspired me to find my own career path and now to create this space where we can explore other people's stories together. My hope here is that our guests might illuminate something in your own path, whether you're contemplating a major change or you're just simply looking for more meaning in your work. Either way, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Sarah Dale to our Clocking Out community. Sarah is from North Jersey, and she describes herself as Jersey girl moves to Montana. In this episode, Sarah shares her inspiring story of taking big risks, hitting rock bottom, and launching several startups, including Project 1490. So without further ado, please enjoy Sarah Dale and her Clocking Out story. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
I am just incredibly excited about this conversation today. A couple reasons. One, when I think about just clocking out in general and looking at your background, we connected several months ago and really sort of got a sense of your journey. And you've had so many clocking out moments. It's so interesting because you went from corporate to entrepreneurship, back to corporate to entrepreneurship. And I am just really excited to learn about the journey and the windy path that you took to get to where you are today. And so just so delighted to have you here.
Thanks so much. Great.
So Sarah, we're going to start with an origin story here. I'd love to hear, tell us, where'd you grow up? Where are you from? What'd your parents do for a living? And we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I grew up in northern New Jersey. I have the hair to prove it. and, um, and my parents are both English. They came over just before I was born. And my dad has an incredible story that, he really started as like a mechanic and a salesperson and then rose to being the president of Jaguar for, he spent his entire career at Jaguar. And he was a race car driver and flew planes upside down. So I had a lot of examples and role models of adventurous kind of people and also really successful people. So, I guess I always thought that I would do something, I had sort of ambition to start early and get somewhere and do something in this lifetime.
Nice. What did your mom do?
My mom, for a long time, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She had gone to college for teaching in England, so she was a teacher for a bit when we were growing up. She owned her own business when we got into high school, and it was an answering service. That was how long ago it was. But she's also a really accomplished singer. And she sang at like the Rockefeller Christmas tree and in a chorale at Carnegie Hall. And yeah, so really they're really interesting people. And now they're 85 and 90 and they're still really active and doing things in their community and everything. So
that's
yeah,
great.
I had some really great role models growing up, honestly.
Yeah, that's it. That sounds like it makes a lot of sense just hearing about your parents, your dad starting his career as a mechanic and then, really growing through Jaguar to the point where he's running the company. That's somewhat very impressive. And your mom sounded like she had an entrepreneurial spirit and, growing up in that household and seeing, your parents thrive and grow within their careers probably was just um, it made such an impression on you early on. And I would imagine you started to see the world of possibility.
Yeah. It was, I feel very, very fortunate because I grew up in a household that anything was possible. You could do anything. Like I never had any uh like limitations on what I could do, where I could go, where I could live. None of it was prescriptive in terms of, this is what you're going to be, or that, but anything was possible. My dad, from where he started, I mean, he grew up during World War II, hiding in bomb shelters and all of that sort of stuff. So there was also an incredible grounded element about both of my parents. And they really, especially my mom, had a real sense of service. So, I feel like you get sort of a diluted version of your parents inside you at some point, and they packed me full of really, good stuff. I feel like, I know a lot of people have, stories of overcoming with their childhoods, but I feel very fortunate that's not my story. It's like I
Mm,
really had a wonderful upbringing, and yeah, I can't sort of make up a a bad story about it. It was
mm.
very, they were really supportive.
That's great. I love that. So, what did you want to be as a young girl growing up?
So it changed a lot. I don't know if it was the same for you, but when I was very little, I think I just wanted to be a race car driver because that's what I thought everybody did. But then I wanted to be a dancer. Then I wanted to be a psychologist. Like I went through the gamut, and but there was something about being an entrepreneur that really did excite me. Like if I'd see movies, where the woman sort of makes her way by selling baby food or whatever it was. I was really interested. And at some point, it really hooked into me I really wanted to be a successful businesswoman. I wanted
Mm,
to follow in my dad's footsteps in that way. And yeah, so I really went after it when I was young.
that is so interesting. So, race car driver, entertainer. I mean, putting those two combined, entrepreneurship is you're destined for that because you're combining risk taker, thrill seeker,
Ah,
and performer. When you're an entrepreneur and you're running a business, your world is around taking risks and being the visionary and stepping outside of your comfort zone and being in front of people. And so it's so interesting how, those two, you know, sort of careers and dreams that you had, really just like I can see the visual of that.
wow.
And
Yeah.
so let's talk about you had a vision of what you wanted to do. What was the sort of thought process around your choice of career and ultimately how did you decide what degree you were going to pursue?
So I knew I was, by the time I started school, I definitely knew I was going into business. And in part because those were the classes I was good at. Like when it came to, I went to a school that's really well known for engineering.
Yeah.
And I knew for sure my brain did not work that way. So my brain seemed to work in a way that marketing and business kind of fit. So that's the direction I headed. I almost switched into English because I also loved writing.
Mm,
But I ended up not taking that path and just doubling down on business. I've got marketing and international business. Yeah.
mm. Very nice. So how was the start of your career? You're working as an intern at Fortune. It sounds like that experience early on led to your first big break. And so tell me about that.
Yeah, 100%. You know, there were a couple of things that happened that were significant during that time. Part of my internship was working in the events department, and Fortune still puts on incredible events. And one of my jobs was to edit the bios of the CEOs that were coming to the event. And I noticed that every single one of them, first of all, at that time, they were all old white dudes. and so all of them either had military experience at their beginning or they had sales. And I thought, well, I'm not going into the military. So I decided I'm going to go into sales. And there's this thing called ad sales that, I'm close enough to at Fortune that's what I'll do. And I then got very lucky to get some great advice from the ad director at the time. Time Inc. at that moment was like the pinnacle of publishing, right? This is long time ago. It's like 90s. And he said, if you stay here from the time you're 17, you're never going to appreciate what you have. So what you need to do is go work somewhere where it's a really hard sell and cut your teeth, and then we'll hire you back in a year. And he told me exactly what to do. He said, call a publisher that's in the B2B space and say, I think you're a really hard sell and I want to sell for you. And that's what I did. And so I got a job working at Chief Executive Magazine, which was a hard sell. And I worked there for a year or so, and then got hired back at Fortune, actually into the marketing department. But that's how it started. So I got some really great advice because he was right. I definitely wouldn't have appreciated how successful that company was at that time, and how many resources you have and all of that sort of stuff.
So your sales career started at that point. When you went back to Fortune, I mean, you were really now selling advertising for Fortune and working there, and you were living in New York City.
Yeah. Living on the Upper West Side. Yeah, it was great. And, I was just trying to climb the ladder as fast as I possibly could. And, part of the journey too, which definitely could have been a big right turn or a left turn for me, I'm really dating myself on this podcast, but that part of my job was to teach the agencies what the internet was. I mean, it was a long time ago, but nobody knew what, it's sort of like how we're dealing with AI right now. And so I was young and I was really into it. So I was like one of two people who had an internet connection at Fortune. And so at that time I was either going into sort of the .com world, which was nascent at the time, and I was getting a lot of offers for that. And that's when I decided to take a vacation to Montana. And then I took a very hard right turn. And I'd probably be really rich if I had stayed to be a part of that boom. But I spent it in Montana instead.
Wow. Interesting. So I want to go back and dig into something you said. You said when you joined Fortune, you got that opportunity to work in a sales role. And you said that your goal was to grow the corporate ladder as quickly and as fast as you could. And I just wonder, at the time, as you reflect back, what was the drive of wanting to grow the corporate ladder as quickly as possible? Like, what were you looking to do?
Yeah, I think I wanted to go as far as I could, as fast as I could at that time. And I think too, because of the way I grew up and who I grew up with, I had an impression of that life, that it must be incredibly fulfilling, because I watched my dad sacrifice, and my mom for that matter, sacrifice a lot to be in the role that he was in.
Mm,
And I thought, man, it just must be the most fulfilling thing that you could possibly do with your life, because here's these, people who are really um sacrificing a lot to be able to do that and to have those roles. So I think that that's what my hope was. And
mm,
it didn't take me very long to kind of see that it's not the end all be all of your life. It wasn't going to be for me. And I looked at the people who were at the top of the ladder and they just didn't seem that happy. And I think that there was something else in me that, didn't, I didn't just want, she worked at Time Warner on my tombstone. And so,
mm.
the hard right turn to Montana happened, and I'm really grateful that I did that.
Wow, that is so profound that your dad started at Jaguar as a mechanic. He spent his whole career there, ultimately became president of Jaguar. And for you as a young girl, just seeing the sacrifices that he made to get to that point, or it was your first job, really, and you were on the same fast track. Like, I am going to be the president of Fortune. No one's going to stand in my way. I am going to work really hard, and I'm going to make my dad proud, and I'm going to be the president of Fortune. And you had a moment where you realized that there's more to life than that status. And you get there and you're like, okay, so then what?
Yeah.
And then you think about the journey along the way and what sacrifices you made and what parts of life that you missed. Tell me about Montana. This sounds incredibly interesting.
Yeah, so I was waiting to hear about a job that I was going to get that was like the I had gone for this job so hardcore in for the whole summer, and it was something I was completely underqualified for. It was like I was 24, and it was like opening a new office in San Francisco, like, and I was like, I'm gonna get this job. And they were like, you're not gonna get that job, but we're gonna hire you next in New York
Mm,
as soon as we get the so I was like, well, I'll just go to Montana for a vacation. And so I was supposed to spend 6 days out there. It ended up being 9 because I didn't want to leave. And there were a couple of things that happened. I didn't know who I was when I was there. All of the corporate New York City stuff and Jersey Girl sort of fell away. And their hierarchy there, you mentioned sort of the status. In New York, it's all about your title, your money, the size of your office at that time, where you work, all of those kind of hierarchical status symbols that we have. And out there, it like work was like, I don't know, not even on the list of things that, you know provided your social hierarchy. It was, how often do you ski, how badass are you, how much do you fish, like, and I thought it was fascinating. And I also read Emerson's Self-Reliance while I was there, and
mm,
that had a huge influence on me. And I just thought, well, if I apply this to my life, I would just move to Montana. And so at that time, now we have Yellowstone and there's a lot of celebrities and everything. But at that time, there were 400 people living in Big Sky. And there were a lot more tourists and everything. But it was a very small, small town. And it was fantastic. It was wonderful. And it was
mm.
totally different perspective on life.
Wow. So you were there for 9 days. Did that ultimately lead to you moving there, or did you come back and make some big life change?
Yeah, so I didn't want to leave even after the 9 days, and I called my mom from the airport, and she said, "Well, you don't have to. You can go back. Just do it the right way. Come back, quit your job, get out of your apartment." And so it took 5 weeks to do all that, and turned down the job that I had gone for all summer, and then I packed my stuff and moved, and then I lived there for 7 years.
Wow. Sarah, I have to comment on how amazing your mother is.
Yes, totally.
I mean, I'm getting chills because I've talked to so many professionals like yourself who they got a degree, they had the amazing opportunity, their first job, like a fortune in any role, whether it's sales, marketing, finance, and they had this sort of aha moment where they realize the work that they're doing isn't their calling at that moment. And then the parents step in and say, "Are you absolutely insane?"
Right.
Like they literally say that. They said, you've worked so hard, you've gotten your degree, you're working for one of the largest advertising media companies in the world. And this is the great, like there's so many kind of adjectives that describe
Yeah.
the place that you are. You're making all this money, you
Yeah.
have this great opportunity, you could be this, you could do this.
Yeah.
Why would you give all of that away?
Yeah.
And the fact that your mom said, like it's almost like she didn't even blink. It was like
Didn't even blink.
supportive right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like just not feeling that pressure of wanting to upset them or, having to prove them wrong. Like I can go live in Montana and still live a successful and happy and fulfilling life. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, I love your mom.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I agree. It's sort of why I was grateful that you asked about my background because, they really were that kind of support. It wasn't just support for go be a CEO. It was support all around for, it's like they wanted their kids to be happy.
Right.
So if that was what happiness was gonna, that was the trail they were gonna take, that was great.
Hmm. That's great. So how upset was Fortune when you walked into your boss's office that day and said, "I'm putting in my 2 week notice and I'm moving to Montana"? They must have been like, they probably weren't surprised.
Well, it's funny you say that because the first thing I had to do was turn down the job that they were holding for me at it was called Pathfinder at the time. It was Time Inc.'s first foray into the digital business. And so I hadn't told anybody yet because I was afraid that everyone was going to say I was crazy. But they called me up to offer me the job, and I just started laughing in the elevator because I was like, "Are you really going to do this? Like you're really going to turn down this job?" And I just like broke out laughing, like I'm really going to do this. And when I said, "Well, I have something to tell you," they said, "You're moving to Montana." And so there was something that was obvious about it when I came back. I just was like, still kind of there, emotionally and mentally. And so Fortune did me an incredible service. They said, "Why don't you keep working for us while you are there?" And at the time, that wasn't, remote work was just not a thing. We
Mhm.
were on 14K modems at the time, and FedEx took like 2 days from where I was living. So they were really gracious and said, just keep going, and we'll pay you hourly or whatever, and you'll be a
Mhm.
contractor. And I did that, and that parlayed into a couple of other things for me out there. I eventually sold uh, special sections while I was there, which that helped me buy land while I was there. And then they called eventually to see if I would do client events and take them horseback riding and fly fishing and that sort of boondoggle kind of thing. And that launched me into a small event business. And so I have so much gratitude for those people and
Mhm.
for that company in particular.
That's fantastic. I love that story. I love how they invested in you and obviously they're an innovative company because they didn't just sort of, you know, operate within a certain construct and they embraced, what you wanted to do and supported, and it ultimately led to some opportunities. And I'm sure they knew in their heart of hearts that it was a matter of time, but maybe they were thinking that, oh, she'll get out there and she'll get sick of it and miss the city and come back. I'm sure there was a little bit of that, but you brought some really nice opportunities and a different way of sort of connecting with their customer, and that's pretty cool. So what led to your first startup? Like, what was the big idea?
Well, it really was in Montana. For some reason, when I got out there, I was really on a mission to not work for anyone else.
Mm,
And so that had moderate degrees of success, to be honest with you. It was like I was sort of in and out of like,
mm,
I got to take a bartending role, or I got to like, there's a lot of, I chopped wood for a living for a little while. Like, there's a lot of different things that you got to do out there to make it work. But be when I was selling the sections for Fortune, that was wonderful. And then when they asked me to do the events for the clients, that was incredible. Like, people were hugging me and squeezing me when they were leaving and saying like they'd had this incredible experience, and they were really transformed. They came off the plane reading the Wall Street Journal and all on their laptops and everything. And then by the time they left, they were, just in heaven. And I was like, wow, nobody hugs you for selling them ad space, like, and so I kind of caught the bug at that point and started a little events company out there. And then I did my own website. So then I started a little website business, so there were lots of little,
mm,
honestly, what should have been kind of side hustles, but I had a lot of different things going on to make, ends meet while I was there. But I definitely loved the event side of things.
mm. So that event side of things is essentially taking the Fortune model and just having companies book trips to come out and do retreats, and you're sort of creating an experience for people
Yeah,
to, whether it's corporate or a group of people, to come out there and experience what you experienced for the first time.
exactly.
And then ultimately, just providing the best experience. And then they have the decision to make when they leave. Like, I'm sure it's very cleansing. It's, very spiritual, even to some extent very emotional, depending on
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some real, like, even meditation and work that they do while they're there. And so the fact that, like, so what ended up happening?
After that sort of first foray into that kind of event side and the experiences, I really started thinking about how do I bottle this up. And you're right, like, it's terms of the things that I experienced coming from the city, and you get out there and you're riding horses or fly fishing or whatever it is. It's like that they're totally new to most people,
Hmm.
going out there. So you have totally new impressions of yourself, and you have totally new ideas around what you're capable of, and
Mm,
I think that's what is so transformative. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in Montana. It could be, just learning something new in your house, right? But that kind of experience, I was just so interested in how do I bottle this up and give it to more people. And so I had an idea about doing it for women in particular when I was out there, and I was working on starting a business called Grace and Grit. And I was gonna, have women come out, and instead of like, here's your horse, we're gonna ride, it's like, no, you go catch the horse and, really learn to saddle it, and all of the things that were felt so empowering to me. And then I got divorced and moved back to New York City kind of in survival mode. And um, I just went right back into advertising. And,
mm,
because I needed to pay rent, and those are the people I knew, and they were again, really gracious to me and welcomed me back. And it took another leaping over stories here, but it took a long time for that original dream to sort of come true.
Mm,
But that's where it started.
wow. So it sounds like things blew up in Montana. And how did that feel? Like,
Oh, it was awful.
I can only imagine. Like, you just threw out a number of life events that occurred. You have a business, you have a marriage,
We built
and
a house, like we
oh,
built it, I like peeled every log in the house. I tiled every floor, like,
oh my gosh,
it was,
blood, sweat, and tears.
yeah. And I really was in love with Montana. And so that was a very, very difficult time. And yeah, I think I cried for like 2 years after I got back to New York because I didn't want to be back in New York. That wasn't like,
Mm,
I want to live back in New York. I'm going to get divorced. It was like, I don't know where I'm going, so it was a very difficult time. Um,
mm,
I think I went back to Montana 15 times in the first 18 months that I moved, and Alaska twice because I was
wow.
like trying not to live in New York City. So
Mm.
it was difficult.
Yeah, I bet the trips back were super frequent early on because it's like, I need this in my life,
Yeah.
and I'm not letting the pull of the big city get me back to the place where I remember where I was. And I appreciate you sharing that. I think that it's very relatable to people whose worlds, mid-career, or their, things feel like they really are on a path to some level of success or some level of fulfillment, and then to just have that turned upside down like that, and then having to go back. I feel like I'm sure there's a lot of people who, whether they started a business or went down a journey where life happens and you end up finding yourself in a different place. And I'm sure there was a lot of life lessons there that as you look back, you have no regrets. Like, things happen and you learn and grow from them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it's not on your time schedule. You don't know when you're gonna understand the whys of things, or get the profit from it, or it's just not on your time schedule. It's like it happens as it happens, and you just, at that time, survival mode to me was like you just have to pull your pants up and do it.
Mm,
And for a time it just wasn't about necessarily what I wanted. It was just what I had to do.
mm,
And then eventually you make a life for yourself that includes a lot more of what you really want when you get out of that kind of survival mode.
mm,
And yeah, and yeah, definitely no regrets, because I then met my husband now, and we have two kids, and my ex-husband and I are fantastic friends.
wow.
So we weren't when we started divorcing, but that
Yeah.
healed as well. We've been out there. My whole family's been out there to see him. So it's yeah, it's, you just never know.
That's fantastic. So your ex-husband stayed in Montana, you left, came back, started working, fell in love, started a family, and now that family is part of your ex's family out in Montana.
Yeah,
That's super cool.
yeah, definitely.
So tell me about your your next big career in the corporate world. So you left Montana, you're back in New York. What brand did you work for now? And, what was that journey like? And it sounds like you clocked out because ultimately now you're running your own company. But tell me about that.
Yeah, so when I got back, one of the people in my whole career since I was an intern, is a man named Jeff Dodge, who was very, very successful in his own right, and was the youngest publisher of Money Magazine, all sorts of things. I think he was the youngest publisher at Time Inc. He was the publisher at Business Week, and before Bloomberg bought it. And so I called him when I got back, and he said, "I thought you were in Montana." And I said, "No, I'm back." And he said, "Do you need a job?" And so he gave me a job.
Wow.
And that was just, yeah, a lot of gratitude for all these people now telling the story. But yeah, so that was when I sort of parlayed myself back into advertising through Business Week, and then went back to Time Inc., then got recruited to the Wall Street Journal, where I spent 10 years and rose up the ranks there, and ended up running digital and the content studio. Yeah.
Sarah, I love how you had this community of amazing people in your network,
Yeah.
especially in the kind of in the professional working world. And I think that, I think the life lesson here and what I'm hearing is that you did such a great job early on in terms of launching your career, and you really, identified with who you are, and you followed your passion of who you are as a person and in that dream. And but, when you needed opportunities or you needed support, you had a network of people that you could reach out to that you've established. And,
Yeah.
I think that it's a good testament of building a network and keeping that network strong so that as you're sort of navigating through your career, you pick up the phone and, people are like, they're there to support you, which is really cool. So, Sarah, I wanted to really kind of dig into like, when was the moment when you were working at the Wall Street Journal, you get back into the corporate world, you're climbing the corporate ladder again. When was the moment that you realize it's time to clock out?
Well, the true story is that I was on a plane on a Sunday night, uh, going to a conference. I just left my two little kids and my
Mm,
husband, and so I was going down to Miami for this event, and on the plane, I was reading Saint Francis when he became the Pope. I'm not Catholic or anything, but I had been told that the document that he wrote, was so good that I had to read it, and it was very much around sort of service, and it was talked a lot about sort of the disposable society that we're living in. We're disposing of things, we're disposing of people, and it was so good and so I don't know, revelatory. And I got off the plane, and I was just having one of those, sort of out of body kind of experiences where I was sitting in a room with a keynote speaker, was the ex-CEO of Pepsi, and he was heralding how smart he was for inventing the gigantic bottle of Pepsi. And I just read this whole thing, and everybody was clapping, and I just thought, what the fuck? Like, like, what are we doing? Like, this is crazy. Like, I don't really know how to explain or describe that moment, but it was just like seeing things in a very different perspective from, it's just all about how much money you can make. And so I had that moment, and very similar to sort of the moment I had in Montana. It was like one of those undeniable truths that you can see for yourself, and now you have to do something. Like,
mm,
you can't deny it and just stay doing what you're doing.
mm,
And so I had to really take a look at both what I was contributing to, and also what I was sacrificing to do it, which my daughters at the time were 4 and 8. And I was basically outsourcing the parenting to our nanny. And That just wasn't why I had kids. And
Wow.
I felt like that was hugely important role to have. If you're, blessed to have children, it's like that's your responsibility to raise them. And yeah, so it was another kind of I don't want to call it an existential crisis because it wasn't really a crisis. It was just like seeing something, the truth of something, and going, I can't keep doing this anymore. So
Wow.
that was the second clock out.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. You said so many things there, and the first is just getting on a plane. You get on a plane, you travel somewhere, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. When you're a day to day, you're in the day to day situation, and whether it's a work function or even a vacation, I think taking time to read, listen to podcasts, explore, gives you a real appreciation for what's important. And I love how you really have this sort of internal sense of um, like putting yourself first and your family first, and then taking action and not letting the pull of the status.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes, though, people don't make the decision because they struggle with the uncertainty of knowing what's on the other side. And some people would rather continue doing what's ultimately making them miserable because the change and the uncertainty for some people is so much more, um, so much bigger that,
100%. And I it's not to say all of those decisions and all of the actions that were taken were not without a lot of struggle
oh,
and without a lot of incredible friends, so really giving me very wise support. And
mm,
so it isn't something that, like sort of after you could tell the story and be like, this happened and then I did this, but it's like in between. That was February. I quit in September. Eh, those months were, I remember being at the picking up my younger daughter from preschool and looking around and literally looking at all the other moms and going, well, they're not the VP of the Wall Street Journal and they're okay. Like, like I'm really going to give up this title. And like, you're at a cocktail party and it's, where do you work? I work at the Wall Street Journal, which, had a lot of cachet, and I was very proud, so giving it all of that up was, not it wasn't so easy,
mm,
it was a lot of struggle, but it's like that moment that really is undeniable, that you just know that you have to follow it.
mm. I love that. That's so inspiring. Mm. So, Sarah, you ultimately left the Wall Street Journal. Tell me about Project 1490.
Yeah, so Project 1490, especially in this conversation now, actually like makes everything make sense, right?
Mm,
Because it was the original idea that I'd had back in Montana around grace and grit and bringing women to have these experiences. But now it's coupled with so many of the other things that we've touched on, right? Like in expanding your network of really good humans, right? And in this case, it's really focused on women, but like if we can expand those networks and also provide sort of confidence and these empowering skill building kind of experiences to women, then all of us will get farther faster. And so Project 1490 is a women's networking community, and we get outside and we shoot bows and chop wood and jumpstart cars and chase chickens and do all kinds of stuff that are not the norm for your everyday sort of city dwelling
mm,
corporate woman. And it's pretty magical because you do those sorts of activities with another group of women, and you're really friends by the end of the day. Real
Mm.
relationships are created instead of those, sort of cocktail parties that we all have to go to and show up and be impressive. It's like really a different kind of experience. So that's what Project 1490 is about.
Yeah. So how did you come up with the name? What's 1490 represent?
So I couldn't use Grace and Grit because of all things, there's a woman in Montana who's trademarked it. So I couldn't use that. And so I really struggled to come up with something else. And the one word that kept resonating with me was Renaissance, because I feel like there was a both and about it, right?
Mm.
You can learn these sort of, let's say, badass kind of activities and skills, but we also want to celebrate what's really incredible about women, and we have incredible dinners with flowers and candles, and we dress up and have wine and all of that sort of stuff. So Renaissance seemed to really cover it, because I feel like we all admire people who are Renaissance women or Renaissance men who know something about everything.
Mm.
And and 1490 is the first year of the Renaissance.
Wow. That's so cool. I appreciate you sharing that. So, Sarah, right now we're living in a lot of uncertainty in terms of the world. And I'm wondering your thoughts and advice for, let's say, professional women, because it really, I feel like at an early age, you exemplified this sort of desire to not only be successful, but really to follow your dream, follow your path, where you were going to leave a mark in the world. And you did two things. You certainly worked really hard in corporate that provided you with kind of like a, sort of a base of experience that propelled you into allowing yourself to lean into, living out your life meaning and purpose. And I wonder, for professional women that are, kind of similar in your situation, like you described at the Wall Street Journal, what advice do you give someone who's thinking about making that tough decision but is struggling with it?
Mm. I think there's a couple of things. Um, so if I could two-part the answer,
Hmm.
one thing in terms of the time that we're living in, one thing that is hopeful to me, because it is a crazy time, is something that we have on our side right now that we didn't, say, 20, 30 years ago.
Hmm.
When I was coming up in my career, for a lot of reasons, there's very, very few spots for women, all of those very known statistics. And women tend to, it was very much a solo sport. It was very much every woman for themselves. And at worst, maybe it got more competitive and clicky and sabotagey and all of that competitiveness, right?
Hmm.
Over the course of my career, women supporting women really became a thing. And I have watched and been a part of other communities where that has made a huge difference. And I feel like if we, I don't know where the world's going, and what the economy's going to do, or what the all of it is beyond me. But I do know that if we really throw our weight with the relationships that we have, building more of them, and being like doubling down on supporting each other, whether they're male or female, right?
Hmm.
We need our communities
Hmm.
now more than ever. And I think that part is hopeful to me, because that's what I'm seeing out there, is that people are really starting to really coalesce with whatever their tribes are or their
Mm,
communities. But expanding that, I think, is really key to the place that we're in. And I think the other part, and maybe it's part of the community aspect too, is it's really hard to get out of your own way sometimes. And if you have an idea, or you there's something that you, even if it's a corporate role that you wish you could have, you want to have, or there's a direction you want to take your life, and there's fear, there's no way out of it in your own head. you know you gotta let other people into it, and because they come with different perspectives, they don't have, there's a lot of science behind, kind of the ruts that we get into in our own brains from our, we have a limited amount of experience in our lifetime, and that's how we see the world, and that's how everything's filtered through. And so you need something, you need other people who can come and kind of shock you into thinking in a new way and seeing things in new ways. And um, so if you're stuck, have a bunch of friends over and have some wine and put it out on the table and
mhm,
be a little vulnerable about it, and see what help you get comes back. It's very, very much a huge part of what we do at Project 1490. That's what our retreats are all about. And um and I see that it works, you know
mm.
and doesn't have to be Project 1490. You can do, you can sort of take the ethos of it and apply it to for yourself.
Mm. I love that. I love the combination between community and really just sort of getting out of your head, because that fixed mindset, your brain is telling you that you're self-limiting. You can't do this because of this. This is who you are. And the fact that you can be vulnerable to friends in a community, in a tribe that you can trust, those people have your back.
Yeah,
And if you're willing to be vulnerable and share your thoughts, your feelings, your dreams, your desires, that community is going to lift you up. And it ultimately will lead to you making the right decision, which is to follow your heart.
yeah, yeah. Because I walked around for years with this idea, not fully baked, not totally understanding how it's going to manifest into like a business. It was just like, I just wanted people to have the experience, but I
Mm,
didn't know how to like turn it into something. And it was, I'm just going to shout her out here because it was Suzanne Stone, who's the CEO of Livestrong, who I sat down with one day, and I told her, like, I can't do it because I've got to put my kids through college, and I can't do it because of this, and I can't do it because of this. And I had this whole list, and she just dismantled every, obstacle that I thought that I had, and just ripped them apart because she had a different perspective on it. And I trusted her,
mm,
trusted her, and so it freed me up to actually start thinking, well, how are some other ways I could do this,
mm.
and that really set me on a path of maybe it is possible.
Yeah,
And we need that. We need other people.
right. I love it. I love that. So, Sarah, how can people find you and Project 1490?
So project1490.com, and you can, all my information is over there. You can grab time on my calendar even from the website. I'm
Nice.
on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. We just started TikTok, which is a whole other thing. But
I love it.
so yeah, you can find us in all sorts of places.
That's fantastic. So, I am just beaming with just like joy from this conversation. I really appreciate you telling your story and really being vulnerable about some of the, the life challenges that you faced and how you grew from those experiences. And I know that anyone listening here today, there's a lot of nuggets that are relatable that people can take, and, some wisdom that you shared. So really appreciate it.
Thanks. This was really great to talk about the stories, and I appreciate you so much having these conversations with not just me, but with all the people that you're talking to, because I think
Mm,
it's real.
yeah, it's so real. So thanks again. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment and say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you like what you're hearing today, please click on the follow button and rate our show. Until next time, remember, if you're sitting there and you're stuck or just unsure of your career or future, and you really think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? And am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others around me? Until next time.